Jackie, this is great. I want a playlist.
Oh, yes. Okay, I'll definitely send it to you. His music is very catchy. Alrighty, let's get this show on the road. I know that folks are still joining our event, but because we have a packed program, let's get started. 1 second. I'm having some technical difficulties here. So thank you for joining the Stop TB Partnerships and India Health Fund's Virtual Innovation Spotlight on Canary's Pelican DigiGENE. I hope I pronounced that correctly. My name is Jackie He, and I am the head of the External Affairs and Strategic Initiatives team here at the partnership. I apologize that basically my lovely chubby face is taking over your entire screen, but I'm having some audio issues. So I'm like literally in my laptop screen as we speak. With that said, before we dive into the program, there are a few housekeeping matters that I would like to go over. First, the Virtual Innovation Spotlight is being recorded and will be made available on the Stop TB Partnerships website in the coming weeks. And this is really to provide an opportunity for those who are unable to join today, access and the ability to also see this presentation after the event. During the presentation, except for our fabulous speakers, please keep yourself muted. During the Q&A session, please use your raise hand function to request the floor. So because this is a small, intimate group of people, I think rather than leveraging the chat box, but you should also feel comfortable to do that, it would be great if we could have an engaging discourse around the presentation. And last but not least, before you ask your question, please provide your name and affiliation so that we can all get to know each other and become friends. So before I give the floor to Raj, it would be great if Sahu and Madhav could provide some remarks on why we are all here and do what we all do. So Sahu, maybe I can give you the floor first, and then we can turn it over to Madhav. Sahu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jackie. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, where you are. So just to quickly tell you from Stop TB Partnership, we have been promoting innovators and also digital health technology, and I'll tell you why. You all know that TB is a disease that has been here for hundreds of years with us. We have a plan to end it. But if you look at how TB care and prevention is implemented, it uses very traditional methods, traditional tools. Sputum microscopy is still the mainstay of diagnosis in many settings. That was discovered by Robert Koch in 1882 or somewhere around that. You can imagine the drugs that we are using are the first line treatment is several decades old. And also the way things are implemented, not easy to access and very mystified kind of thing. So it is very important that we need to change that. And to change that, it is important that we engage with innovators, not the traditional ones, but the ones that are currently changing the world in many other areas. And that is why we want to support innovators who come with some brilliant ideas. At StopTB, we are very keen to take risk and support new technology. Some technologies may work, some may not work, but it is important that our partners, as well as donors, fund those technologies, because if you don't fund and don't see their development, you will never know whether they are good, how good, and so on. So I think it is very important that we support innovators. In the past, we have got feedback that innovators were discouraged to come into the area of TB, but now probably that is changing and we are making more efforts to change that. We will connect innovators to different partners to see that their ideas go through forward. And also I wanted to say that not just the diagnostics and the drugs that will diagnose and treat TB, but in the present context, it is very important to use digital tools that improve the access for these diagnostics and drugs and make it more feasible, easier for people to access, as well as the healthcare system to provide them. So I think that is the idea why we are promoting digital health tools. We saw during the COVID pandemic just before us how the virtual care and all tools involved in the virtual care became so important. In the TB care also, we are pushing TB programs to think about how to go virtual and how to adapt in this COVID era to be successful. So I think digital tools are very important. Today we have a mobile phone in everybody's hand, or at least access to the household by mobile. I think a lot of things can be done, which earlier was not possible through that, and using machine learning, artificial intelligence, which can amplify further the potential of diagnostics and treatment. So I would stop there, but just say that this is a regular platform, and each virtual innovation spotlight, we try to highlight one kind of technology, and that we will do today. I will now hand over to Madhav from India Health Fund to please go ahead.
Thank you, Sahu. And again, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone, whatever part of the world you're in. And what a pleasure and what a privilege it is to be here. So I represent India Health Fund, which is an impact investment fund set up by Tata Trusts. And our focus is on supporting the development and scale up of solutions which are leveraging the latest in science and technology to improve the outcomes in diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of communicable diseases. So very pertinent to today's conversation. We have a particular bias towards technologies which can be adapted to more than one disease. And we particularly like solutions which need funding to go from proof of concept to market, with a focus on public health settings, affordability, as well as access. So those are our sweet spots. And while we're based in Mumbai, our philosophy is very much India for the world. So we strongly believe that there is a role to be played by basing innovations or supporting innovators who are based in India or other emerging markets to
Am I the only one has Madhav frozen?
No, I don't. Madhav as well is frozen.
Okay. So Madhav? Okay. Then how about this? Why don't we proceed with Raj's presentation, and then maybe what we can do is ask Madhav to give us some closing remarks, and he can finish his comments at that time. So maybe with that said, I want to thank Sahu for nicely setting the scene for our main speaker, Raj Reddy, the president and CEO of Canary Global Inc. Without further ado, Raj, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jackie and Madhav and everyone for inviting us here today. It's afternoon, I'm in London today, and certainly good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Again, my name is Raj Reddy. I'm the CEO of Canary Global Inc., and we're going to walk you through our technology today and its application to TB. So a little bit about us, and my assistant Osho is on, so you might hear me call her name. Osho, if you could advance the slide, thank you. No, back, yeah, there, that's perfect. So Canary Global is very familiar with the regions where TB is prevalent. We have an office in Bangalore, India. I have over 70 employees there. We do a lot of advanced development, biosensor development, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. We have a full crew there. Our company is focused on building the best advanced point of care molecular diagnostics in the world. And our mission really is simple. We want to deliver a liquid biopsy to the bedside so that patients can be treated in real time for whatever disease they're looking at. We have a focus in cancer and infectious disease. You may have heard of us lately. We have developed the world's fastest COVID system. We have a 2-minute saliva COVID test that's being launched here in London by British Airways. Do you want to go to the next slide, Osho, please? So from a social impact perspective, focused around TB, our goal is to deliver a $5 to $8 cartridge for MTB RIF diagnosis. We want our reader to be around $250 to $500, and that's what we're seeing already with our readers, and you compare that to $5,000 to $30,000 currently. Our system is cloud-enabled or locally enabled, depending on the diagnosis. The results are in 20 to 30 minutes. Basically, in India, when we test our device, we put it on the back of mopeds, and we let people ride around with our devices, go to very difficult areas, and do testing in those areas. And that's how we know our devices work in some of the most difficult regions. They work at room temperature. They can be carried in temperatures that are difficult, such as temperatures in India. We have partners also in sub-Saharan Africa and other areas where we think this particular product for TB will be very useful. Next slide, please. So we have two basic platforms. We touched on the ultra-rapid platform, which is used for COVID, and we also have a partnership with the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Fund for Alzheimer's detection. But the platform we'll be focusing on today is our DigiGENE platform, and this is a portable cartridge-based system that's used to genotype any RNA, DNA sequence, or any nucleic acid at the point of care. Do you want to go to the next slide? Our main platform targets are infectious disease, oncology. So we're looking at lung cancer right now, a liquid biopsy that can be done either through a nurse, a mobile nurse at the patient's home or at the bedside in a hospital. Antimicrobial resistance, which is the TB product that we'll be talking about today, and neurodegenerative disease, which is the Alzheimer's product that we spoke about earlier. Next slide. One of the interesting areas that we're exploring, and I think, one of our biggest pain points right now is catalytic funding, for TB. We have lots of interest in other areas, and we're doing very well in those areas, but TB is a heavy lift. It's a complex area, and trying to find a catalytic funding to develop it is being challenging, to be very honest. And Jackie and Stop TB has been extremely helpful in trying to navigate those waters for us, and Madhav as well. One of the interesting areas that we're looking at is microRNA. First, microRNA are non-coding RNA, usually 18 to 20 nucleotides in size. And we know that intracellular bacteria like MTB can survive and multiply in phagocytic cells and regulate host defenses in a number of ways. And one of those pathways is expression of microRNA. And a good example of that is microRNA M29. M29 can be used to differentiate active from latent TB in some of the studies. It's in fact overexpressed. It's increased in T cells of active TB patients when compared to latent TB patients in negative control. So here's a good way of using mRNA to differentiate active and latent TB in 20 or 30 minutes at the point of care. So we would, in our system, we would use multiple mRNA targets to resolve these kind of issues. And where it becomes, even more interesting, I think, is using mRNA to differentiate pulmonary from extrapulmonary TB, and also looking at some of the newer drugs like bedaquiline and others, where the gene target is not necessarily well resolved. And in these cases, microRNA potentially could give a very good targeting system to look at gene resistance or response to therapy. Next slide, please. So the Pelican product, which is made by Canary, is the world's first digital CRISPR engine. So it's highly selective and it's very easy to use. The results, again, are rendered in around 20 to 30 minutes at the point of care. Next slide. In terms of performance, we're measuring down to around the attomolar levels, which is smaller than an single HIV virus in weight, for example. And we're measuring around 0.1% allele frequency quite easily with this type of device. That means that when you're looking at very small viral fractions, for example, in co-infected HIV patients who don't produce sputum very well, or children, it becomes very important to have a high sensitivity product to be able to give you good performance in those loads. And this product has that potential. Next slide. So the product DigiGENE can be used for not just looking at tuberculosis and MTB resistance, but it can be used for other diseases as well, like CAP, MRSA, where there's very clearly defined gene targets. It informs the prescriber before they prescribe the drug whether or not the pathogen will be susceptible to that particular drug. And this thing, again, can fit in your pocket or on your desk, so it can be used very easily. It is app-enabled and cloud-enabled, so it's a digital device. So these results can also be beamed to any center that's needed to cross-tabulate the results, or even read the results quite easily on pretty well any smartphone. We've developed it for both Android and iOS. So again, the advantage of this particular product, we think, is that for the cost of the device, you could deploy many of our particular devices. This DigiGENE product can be nested. That means you could have, if you want to increase throughput at the point of care at a rural clinic that you've driven to on a motorcycle, you could have 10 of these devices in your backpack, and you could have a very high throughput system, for that particular medical station, and do TB testing right there and then, and give the appropriate therapy. Next slide. The DigiGENE platform is relatively easy to use. In terms of using it, there's a collection step. You collect the sputum, usually 1 ml to 3 ml. You don't need very much sputum. You pour it into the cartridge, and there's a complexitation stage. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes. You then insert the cartridge into the reader, and the reader does the rest of the work. The whole process takes between 20 or 30 minutes, depending on the user. So it's relatively easy to use, and the cartridge is disposable. So downstream from the MTB RIF product, we can look at also secondary drugs and resistance, as well as other issues in TB with the same platform. And the big advantage of a product like this is as you penetrate into rural areas and small stations and medical stations, you give the clinician or the provider the potential to test and initiate treatment for drug resistance to TB in a single visit. And as you all know, this is a very important problem with medication adherence and other things. It's hard to call a patient back in some of the communities where TB is prevalent to change therapy or to go on a new therapy. So if you can do that in one visit, certainly the efficacy of that TB product is increased. In this particular engine, we're targeting the 6110 gene as well as the 1081 for TB. And the reason for that is 6110 has about 5 copies per cell and 1081 has about 15 copies per cell compared to RPOB, which is just a single copy per cell. This means having multiple copies helps us improve the resolution in low viral loads of the product and give you good performance. And the product itself selects at very low target fractions as well. So when you combine that all together, you've got a product that can really perform well, again, in these co-infected HIV patients or children where sputum levels are low, viral levels could be low, and in the current testing paradigm, there are issues to testing that way. In the future, we have the current cartridge system we have actually has 4 targets on it. So we plan to supplement the gene targets with microRNA targets as well to give you even more sensitivity. And that's sort of a development path, again, dependent on the catalytic funding that we're able to develop for the product. This is just a quick slide giving you some comparisons. I think the important thing here is it's a very efficient product. It's low cost. You're able to get cartridge prices sort of in the range where people can afford them. You can buy, 20 readers for the price of a single point of care device that's out there today. This gives you much more power to go out and tackle TB. And the first thing with TB is you got to find out who has it so you can treat it. And a device like this will give you that kind of power. The product is also used in other diseases. We're currently testing it for lung cancer, where you would detect lung cancer, and also for therapy selection. We're looking at EGFR fractions in the product as a liquid biopsy at the bedside. We're working with some health systems in the United States and elsewhere to be able to do the trials on that product and eventually deploy it. And we think that product will be very transformative in how you care for a patient, because again, the clinician is going to get the results either at the patient's home in real time or at the bedside in real time, so that they can initiate the correct cancer therapy pretty quickly, or screen even at the primary care level for cancers like lung cancer, where there's a high prevalence but very late diagnosis. The platform itself has the capability to multiplex. Currently, as I mentioned, we have 4 sensors on it. So we can detect 4 different targets, 4 different gene targets. We can mix and match. We can do gene targets and microRNA targets at the same time. So that it gives you a very robust platform to really go after diseases like TB. When you have multiple targets, it's also a quantitative analysis. So when you're looking at microRNA and quantitation, you can have those results in the cloud and create an AI model around what that microRNA looks like in TB resistance, or when you're looking at latent versus active TB, and create a novel biomarker for the disease where it's difficult currently to differentiate the disease. So it gives you a lot of punch when you're tackling a disease, a big killer like tuberculosis, where you have now the power of artificial intelligence at the bedside, at the rural community, at the point of care where you're treating the patient, where you couldn't have imagined you had that power before. now you can have it and deliver those results to patients where it's needed. And this is our current test that you might have heard of that we're deploying with British Airways and others here in Europe. It's our 2-minute ultra-rapid saliva test. It's a point of care test. It's currently approved in Europe, MHRA approved, CE approved, as well as going through the FDA cycle in the US. And you can see with the products, we're getting good specificity, 100% in this product, 98% sensitivity, and we see even higher sensitivity in the DigiGENE product because the natural selection of the CRISPR engine is very high by itself. So here you've got a very powerful platform that rivals quantitative PCR, but gives you a much more efficient way to deliver it. Next slide. And just a little bit about our executive team. I think Anna's on the phone today. Anna comes from global health. And so we have experience on our executive team with the global health world. She's looked at malaria and other diseases in the global health arena, as well as other medtech devices. Our company has a number of partners to scale. So when we build products in India, we also have an office in Canada and Toronto, another one in New York, and I just opened an office here in Ireland. So we've got good global capabilities to scale our products once they're developed. We have manufacturing partners worldwide that can scale it into the millions. The COVID product currently, I think, is tracking at probably around 50 million units in a year. So the company now has good capabilities to take any product on any platform and scale it very efficiently. So next slide. And thank you. I think that's the end. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for letting us introduce our TB technology to you. And I think I'll give the floor back to Jackie and Madhav at this point in time.
Yes. So I think I'm going to change it up a little bit, and maybe Madhav, we're going to get to your thoughts and questions, and I'm going to ask everyone where Liz is seeing this from. But Madhav, why don't I ask you to give your remarks now before everyone starts signing off, because I think it's critical for folks to know about India Health and how you are trying to support. Sorry, I know, can you hear me now? No. Okay.
Yeah, so Jackie, I'm so sorry for interrupting you. This is Janina from Stop TB Partnership. Jackie, we did hear a little bit of a problem with your voice, but if I understood correctly, if you do not mind, we'll go back to Madhav and give him the floor to present again the amazing activities that the India Health Fund is engaged in. So yeah, sorry again for going back a little bit in the program. So Madhav, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies. I had an embarrassing technical failure and I dropped off mid-sentence, but hey, that's the way of the world these days. So today's sort of been the day for tech glitches. I apologize for that. But I think what we've heard today pretty much encapsulates what India Health Fund is all about, which is identifying technology-driven platforms which can be adapted to multiple diseases to significantly move the needle in the diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of more than one communicable disease. And our partnership with Stop TB is probably one of the most valuable partnerships India Health Fund has, because we share a common goal of really leveraging the power of emerging technology to bring improved outcomes to one of the oldest diseases that we're dealing with. And I think what we've seen today really has the potential to transform the continuum of care in not just TB, but several other diseases. And that's very much what India Health Fund is all about as well. And that's where our partnership with Stop TB, as well as several other organizations, really comes in, because we share that common goal of applying technology to the continuum of care and to bring it closer to the point of care, make it more affordable for patients, and certainly diagnose the missing millions, as well as many of the emerging challenges that we're seeing of multi-drug resistance, extra drug resistance, as well as mitigating the impact COVID has had on, I think, several healthcare programs, including those for TB. And that's again where the role of these multi-disease platforms begins to play a significant, begins to have a much greater impact, particularly when it comes to patient outcomes. So I will stop there. And thank you all once again on behalf of all of us for finding the time to make it, and to Raj and the team at Canary for, I think, this fantastic presentation. And I'll turn it back to Jackie and Yanina.
Thanks, Madhav. So can people hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. And I'm sure you can also see my beautiful eyebrows and eyeshadow and my foundation as well. Anyway, with that said, okay, now moving on to the fun part of the Virtual Innovation Spotlight, because it's kind of like the Shark Tank of our event. Just before we move on to that, does anyone know where this scene is from? Maybe just put it in your chat box. But with that said, I think what I want to do now is I want to open up the floor to everyone. It would be great if you do have any comments, questions, or thoughts about anything that you have seen and heard so far. If you could raise your hand, and we will make sure that we give you the floor. And please don't be shy. I mean, this is a very good group of people that we have here, and it would be great to have an honest discourse, because one of the things we are trying to do is strengthen as early as possible the feedback loop between the innovators and our partners, particularly our in-country partners. I think we sometimes tend to, at least in global health, look at these innovations, the use cases, the design, et cetera, without really the necessary input that we need from the countries, the communities and people that we are trying to serve. So maybe I will go first. And I don't know if this is even possible or not, but Raj, as you were talking about the ultra rapid test for COVID-19, I was thinking, is that a technology that could also potentially be translated for TB, or is it just like scientifically and engineering wise not possible?
That's a good question. It is applicable to other diseases, where there are protein targets, for example, Alzheimer's disease and others. When we're looking at gene targets like TB or microRNA targets, our other product that I highlighted, the DigiGENE product, is the one that really is more suitable for tuberculosis. And also for the scientists, it gives you a nice quantitative analysis as well.
And I mean, I know we talk a lot about point of care, but one of the things I'm really passionate about, and something that our team is definitely trying to catalyze more, is community and home-based care. And so I'm curious about the various solutions that you presented today. While I think currently a lot of that is point of care, how feasible is it to even move some of the solutions that you are developing more closer to the communities and where the people are?
Jackie, that's an excellent question. So for the COVID product and the protein mapping engine, we are applying to the FDA for home use. So it could be used at home as well as point of care. In Europe, we really focused more around point of care because frankly, that's where the market was in Europe and other areas. But certainly the products can be used at home, and they're not complicated to use from a use case perspective. But each regulator, in different areas, we have to work with them to make sure that we get the appropriate approval for home care. But it is the goal. These are products that are designed to be used by the average user. They don't have to be medically trained. They don't have to be, a doctor, a nurse, a pharmacist. They can be just anybody.
No, that's really great to hear. So I don't want to, I have more questions, but I don't want to hog up everyone's time. Does anyone who is on the call have any comments or questions for Raj or the Canary team? I mean, I know Sahu has to always have questions. He always has questions. Well, he questions me a lot, so maybe that's why. Anyone? Sahu, yes.
I think, thank you for making this presentation. It looks very exciting. I was wondering, what is your plan for testing the accuracy of the test for TB? As you know, TB, you will have to use the gold standards that are currently there in molecular testing as well as culture maybe. So can you elaborate a bit about how you plan to do that and what kind of support you will need?
That's a very good question. So part of the relationship we have with Stop TB is putting us in touch with institutions in India that are near our lab in Bangalore and other areas so that we can obtain samples and correlated results to the gold standard so we can compare our results against the gold standard. So the plan is to do that testing in conjunction with partners that are referred to us from either Madhav or Jackie that we can work with. And we've identified some already. So I think, the next step is to potentially do that and work with the groups, so that we can bring the technology forward. It is a very heavy lift, for a single company to bring a product like this in a single vertical to the market alone. So the problem that we're facing again is we're a late stage company for many of our products, and we're fine in those areas. But with TB, the platform's developed, but building out the product for testing is going to take a little bit of money and time, and that's why we're looking for partners to help catalyze that, in increments, so that we can bring this product to market. We're excited about it. We think it'll make a huge change in people's lives, but we need this is going to take a village to be able to bring it to bear in a market like TB, which is so vast. We really are looking for the appropriate help, and Jackie, I gotta say, and her team have been just outstanding.
Oh, Raj, you don't need to. I won't say the phrase because I think it's inappropriate these days. But I think Madhav and maybe the India Health Fund team, I mean, it would be really great maybe this group to hear also, beyond the remarks that Madhav gave. I mean, it's really been frustrating and difficult from our perspective as well, because I think, there's been this huge shift where, generally speaking, the developer of a lot of the global health solutions have been big multinationals and pharma companies who have both the human and financial resources to navigate the global health landscape, which is quite treacherous. But now what we're seeing, and even though we've been at the forefront of really trying to leverage digital health technologies even way before COVID-19 really helped, I think, accelerate this types of solutions. But most of the developers of these types of solutions are SMEs and startups coming from the affected countries. And I think we haven't found the right platform or mechanism yet that makes it easier for these kinds of innovators who are developing kind of the next emerging or future generations of solutions that are going to bring community home-based care. And so Madhav and the IHF team, I think it would be great to hear what you've been trying to do, not only for Canary, but for other innovators in kind of this similar situation, and what you think is going to be really required to even further smooth out this pathway, which we're still figuring out day by day.
No, thanks, Jackie. And I think what you've brought up is pretty much the reason why India Health Fund exists. because we were set up on the thesis that there had been market failure in the area of communicable diseases. And the market failure was because over time, infectious diseases had largely become diseases that were funded either by government programs or not-for-profit. So there just wasn't enough return for the pharma and biotech and health tech industries to make the kind of investments that are needed to bring the latest technologies to solve for these. And I think Sahu gave us many great examples of where TB has lagged in the development of those solutions. Now that's very different from what we're seeing in non-communicable diseases. You take oncology, you take diabetes, cardiac care, where it's really the latest and greatest that's coming out pretty regularly. And they're making significant differences to patient outcomes. And I think the reasons for that market failure are very, very simple. There just wasn't enough economic return for industry, which runs for profit, to just be able to justify the kind of investments that are needed. So like all good capitalists, they had to put their capital where they were able to justify the returns to their investors and shareholders. And that's where I think the role of organizations like India Health Fund comes in. So we are really a leverage fund, which have been, I think, very generously supported by philanthropic funding from Tata Trusts. The Tata Trusts themselves get their funding from for-profit activities. So it's a fairly unique model in that sense. But the way we operate is as a leverage fund. And the leverage we try to bring about is by bringing together partnerships of both users as well as funders. And I think that's typically where I think very promising solutions that are driven by particularly startups tend to have challenges because they don't have the access and they don't have the relationships with either the end users, who tend to either be governments or large entities who buy at scale and use at scale. And I think that's the role that we try to play. We try to bring these various players together so that the innovator who has a promising solution is able to engage directly with the end users and create that pathway from concept to end use, and then obviously try and facilitate the catalytic funding that Raj is talking about to whatever extent possible. And I think relationships between, like the ones that India Health Fund and Stop TB have, go a long way towards that. Because between us, we're really able to, I think, move the networks and bring people together. And that's, I think, at the heart of what we do and why we do it.
Well, as my husband would like to say, I tank my way through everything. So I'll be the tank, and Madhav, you could be the very eloquent and elegant person behind me that smooths over the destruction I cause as we try to smooth out this pathway. But I think this is a really interesting topic, and I think it's giving me an idea about how we might have to bring together some of the innovators, particularly the SMEs and startups we're working with, together and have more of a roundtable discussion. And I really want to bring our in-country partners at this table too, because I think it's really critical that we continue that strengthening of the feedback loop. But I think we need to sort this out. I mean, we are just not going to end TB or any of these diseases by 2030 by leveraging traditional technologies or whatnot. So as difficult as it is, I think this is an important problem, for the lack of a better word, that we need to solve. And I apologize, I'm jumping around, but that's how normally my brain works, but it's all structured in here. But Raj, I was on a really interesting call yesterday around cough solutions. And as I was on this call around cough solutions, I was thinking about the solutions that Canary develops, particularly leveraging volatile organic compounds and breath and et cetera. And this is because I'm not really a technical expert, but I wanted to know, what is the difference between the cough solution to screen for TB versus the type of solutions you're developing to leverage VOCs to potentially screen and diagnose TB?
Oh, yeah, well, this solution that we presented today is a molecular solution. So this is from a liquid sample from sputum. We have worked on, as you know, a breath. So we have a breath device, actually. The problem, I think, with the breath device is that it's a little bit more costly. So from a cost perspective, it's a little bit more expensive to deploy into the field. We've deployed it in the field in India and used it, but from a scale, and unless the scale is massive, bringing the cost to something similar to what the cartridges that we're proposing for MTB and RIF on our molecular tested we presented today would be difficult. It's a more complicated solution. It would have an application in certain instances. Again, you go back to children who don't produce sputum very well, or if you go to co-infected HIV patient and others who simply can't cough, or people who have a very dry airway and they're just not able to produce sputum. I think those cases would be well served by the breath VOC solution, because you just have to breathe, and that could be used as a screening tool, for TB in those cases. But it would be limited, and when you limit it, then the economics start to come in, and the price goes up. So that's the challenge with the VOCs. I think the solution that we presented today, the DigiGENE solution, is very cost effective. We're building it now for our lung cancer and other diseases. It's a very good solution for TB in the field. It's very fast, it's very effective, it's very accurate. So I think for a general purpose tool, it's a much better tool.
Okay, no, that's good to understand also from my perspective, because I think when I first met Canary and you, I think the breathalyzer was something that we had been discussing, but it seems like such a natural type of solution you would have, but you're right, the cost and price point particularly is something that needs to be considered. So that's really good to know. I think before we close this BIS, I just want to give others a final opportunity to ask questions or to provide any comments. But I think, going forward, I just want to note that we are going to go on a hiatus for the summer, because we pride ourselves to be like the CBS, ABC, and NBC of global health, and we need a hiatus for this summer to reconvene ourselves. But we will recommence these events in the fall with another exciting lineups and some tweaks to how we structure these events, because again, our main goal with these events is to primarily strengthen the feedback loop between innovators like Canary, developing some really interesting solutions, and connect them with the in-country partners so that they have an earlier visibility for both entities on what's coming down the pipeline and kind of what the needs are in the real life settings and contexts and countries and communities and people that we're trying to serve. So I don't see any raised hands nor comments. So if anyone would like to connect with Canary and Raj, please email us at this email address that you see on your screen. But for any additional information about past and future virtual innovation spotlights, feel free to shoot us an email or follow us on Twitter. So with that said, I just want to really thank all of our speakers and for Canary and Raj for an excellent presentation. And I hope everyone has a safe and healthy and nice day and evening. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.